Hello students, myself Deeksha from www.nucleonacademy.com. I'll be helping you in your concepts of biology. So without any further delay, let's move to the class. In this video, we will discuss a topic from class 10, chapter 6 NCERT, that is nutrition in human beings. A related topic has already been discussed in another video, that is nutrition in plants. The link for the video is given in the description. So let's start with the nutrition in human beings. Humans have a complete organ system which is called as human digestive system in their body to carry out the whole process of nutrition. I would again like to remind here that nutrition as a whole is a process where the food is taken up and utilized by the body. So here in case of human digestive system, we see that this digestive system is majorly subdivided into two categories, that is alimentary canal and accessory glands. So alimentary canal is also called as human gut or digestive tract. You see that there is a difference, digestive system and digestive tract. Actually alimentary canal or human gut and digestive system, they all are the name of a place, of a tract or a path when it is moving throughout our digestive system. So accessory glands will include all the glands that are present outside the alimentary canal and are aiding in the process of digestion, but alimentary canal will be the one which have a series of organs through which the food will be passing one by one. So let's start discussing the alimentary canal first. I would first of all write about the sequence of organs. The diagram we will draw later, but first of all let's write the sequence of organs in the alimentary canal. So the sequence starts with, first is buccal cavity, also known by the name of mouth, second esophagus, third stomach, fourth small intestine, fifth large intestine, sixth rectum and seventh anus. All these organs are in the sequence in which the food will be passing through them. And if we talk about the accessory glands, then first are salivary glands, then the gastric glands, pancreas, liver, intestinal glands. Now without any further delay, let's talk about the diagram, or more appropriately I should call it anatomy. Anatomy simply refers that how is the internal organization. So when we draw the diagram of human digestive system, what I have actually seen is that students struggle in making the actual human figure. But let me tell you this, when this diagram is supposed to be drawn in your examination, the human figure does not hold any credit of mark. So I would always recommend to just focus on the organs and the digestive system, but not on the human figure. So I will do the same here. I will not draw the human figure. I will simply draw the different parts of digestive system so that it becomes more clear to you how to make the diagram. First we will draw mouth, then a broad chamber which is called as pharynx. It is followed by a long narrow tube which is called as esophagus or food pipe. Now stomach, it's a J-shaped organ here. We will be drawing it in this manner. Then this tube-like structure is small intestine. But before we move further, let's just make a boundary of large intestine here first, and we will complete the large intestine first. Now we will complete the small intestine part. So these are the two ends of small intestine. Although small intestine is highly coiled, drawing small intestine is quite difficult. So you cannot draw the completely coiled form of small intestine. It will become very messy for you. So you can just show a little amount of coiling here. Okay, these are the two ends and you can connect them. Okay. So this was just about the alimentary canal. Now in order to draw the digestive glands or the accessory glands, we will use a different color. So first there will be salivary glands in the buccal cavity inside the mouth. Then liver. It is present just on the another side of the stomach. Stomach is present on the left hand side and liver is just present adjacent to it on the right side. And there is a bag-like structure called gallbladder here. Then pancreas, it is present just behind the stomach. So you see I am keeping the stomach in front and pancreas at the back. and it's a leaf shaped structure. So if you are confused how to draw them, you just draw a leaf. We will connect the ducts here now, and after that there are glands present in the stomach and the glands present in the intestine. So let's label them first. Buccal cavity, pharynx, esophagus, also called as food pipe. This is stomach. This is large intestine on the outer side. Then small intestine. And at last rectum and anus. Now let's mark the accessory glands. Salivary gland present in buccal cavity. Then liver. Then gastric glands here. Pancreas. Intestinal gland. And here you must be wondering what this terminal end of large intestine is. It is actually of no significance in the digestive system now. It is called as vermiform appendix. Now let's talk about each and every organ in detail and how the process of digestion is carried out here. So first of all, we will start with buccal cavity. So buccal cavity contains salivary glands. Salivary glands produce a digestive juice which is called as saliva. Saliva contains two major components, that are mucus and salivary amylase. Mucus will be seen produced all throughout the digestive tract because it helps in the lubrication process. So mucus will have the same function here also. It keeps our mouth wet and lubricated, well lubricated all the time, and also along with that it helps in maintaining the pH at slightly alkaline situation. If you are not clear about the pH, let me tell you, pH is an indicator for acidity and basicity. Salivary amylase on the other hand is the starch digesting enzyme. So you see, saliva was the digestive juice and salivary amylase is the starch digesting enzyme, and it converts starch into maltose. Starch is a complex sugar in the form of a chain, while maltose is a simpler sugar. I'm not saying simplest sugar, we call it simpler sugar because it is just a combination of two glucose molecules attached with each other, as you could see here. I would like to elaborate about the pH also. If you are not sure what pH is an indicator of acidity and basicity. So slightly alkaline situation, it simply means that the pH will remain in the range of slightly basic nature as compared to the rest of the organs. So let's move forward. Apart from salivary glands, there are present two other components in the buccal cavity as well, the tongue and the teeth. Although these two structures do not produce any enzymes specifically, but they indirectly help in the process of digestion. So we will discuss about them also. So tongue helps in the tasting of food, mixing food with the saliva, and guides the food towards the esophagus. You see, it is a multi-purpose organ. It helps us in speaking also. I'm able to speak right now with you. It is because of my tongue. So along with that, it's a sense organ. It helps in the tasting of food. But apart from that, you see that since it is a muscular organ and it can move very well inside our buccal cavity as compared to the other parts of our mouth, so it helps in the mixing of food with saliva. Now, what is the significance of it? Since saliva contains the enzyme, so it needs to come in contact with each and every part of the food that you have just brought into your mouth. So it helps in the mixing for two purposes. Number one purpose is that the salivary amylase will be able to reach each and every corner of your food, and second purpose is that because of the mixing with saliva, the food will become moistened and as a result it can be easily swallowed. Third thing, it guides the food towards esophagus. It means when we have to swallow it, when we have chewed the food and it is well mixed with saliva, it will be swallowed with the help of esophagus. But to the esophagus, who will send that food? It is the tongue. Then we move forward to the teeth. So teeth carries out chewing or mastication of food, and it also increases the surface area of food for digestion by the enzymes. Now what do I mean by this? Actually, chewing or mastication, they help in the digestion process indirectly. what mastication does is it increases the surface area of the food. It physically breaks it down into smaller pieces, and hence surface area increases, and on those surface area the enzymes will have a better reachability in order to digest your food. So you must have heard this very common instruction by your elders that you should chew your food properly for two basic reasons. Number one reason, if you will chew your food properly, it will get digested easily, and for number two reason, if you will chew your food properly, then it will not get stuck in your esophagus while swallowing. Now, this was all for buccal cavity. Let's now move forward to esophagus. So esophagus does not lead to production of any digestive juices inside them. Hence, there is no digestion seen occurring here. So basically what happens through esophagus is that the food passes with the help of peristaltic movements of the smooth muscles. So this is important to note here. What do we mean by peristaltic movements? They are the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of smooth muscles around esophagus. So smooth muscles, you must be knowing already that they are the involuntary muscles. Their movement is not under our control. They move as per the signals from the brain. So peristalsis must be clear. It is the process with the help of which we are able to swallow something. Now next we move to stomach. So stomach contains gastric glands. These gastric glands produce a digestive juice which is named as gastric juice, and gastric juice is a preparation of the three components which are hydrochloric acid, the chemical name is HCl, then mucus and pepsin. Pepsin is the enzyme actually. Now let's talk about the significance of all these three. Now HCl since is an acid, so it acts on the germs which may enter with the food and water. It maintains acidic pH which is required to activate the pepsin, the enzyme. Now mucus, as I already stated, that it is always helpful in the lubrication process, but apart from that it also protects the stomach wall from the action of acid. And then last is the pepsin, which is the protein digesting enzyme. You could remember P for protein and P for pepsin, okay? So they are having the same initials and you could remember with that. Coming back to the mucus again, okay? So I would like to just elaborate a little bit here that protection क्यों ज़रूरी है. Why protection is needed is because stomach cells are also made up of the similar kind of components of which the germs were made of, the microorganisms were made of, which have to be killed by the acid in order to protect ourselves from any kind of disease. Now you see that since both of them are cellular in nature, the germs also and the cells which are present in the stomach also, so germs need to be killed off but stomach cells are not. So in order to protect stomach cells, our stomach wall has a very thick covering of mucus which separates the stomach cells from the acid which is present inside the stomach. Next then we move to small intestine. Now so far the digestion of our food has already started for the presence of starch and protein. So if our food contains starch only, its digestion has already started in the buccal cavity itself. And if the food did not contain any starch but proteins, it was a protein rich food for example, then its digestion started only when it reached the stomach. Now after this, after staying in stomach for a while, the food moves into the small intestine. Small intestine is a place where complete digestion and absorption of food occurs. So we will see that there will be many glands which will be helping in this complete digestion. Later on we will see how small intestine is able to carry out the process of absorption of the digested food. So let's begin with the digestive glands first. First we will talk about, first let's talk about the liver. It produces a digestive juice which is called as bile juice, and the bile juice majorly contains bile salts which carry out a specific process with the fats which is called as emulsification of fats. Now you need to be careful here that emulsification of fat is not the digestion of fat, it is a physical breakdown of fat. What it means is that large fat globules broken down into smaller droplets, smaller fat droplets. So it is a physical breakdown, it is not the digestion which is occurring here. So overall we see that liver does not carry out any digestion process, but yes, it is very crucial for the digestion of fats because it prepares the fats in the food to get digested by the enzymes which we are going to discuss further. Before moving forward, we will see that bile juice also contains mucus which helps to bring the pH back to alkaline state, because I hope you realize that the food has just entered into the small intestine from stomach and it contained good amount of acid inside it. So this acidic pH will not remain constant all throughout the rest of the organs, and this pH will again be converted into the alkaline state. So that part is done by the mucus which is present in the bile juice. So this was all about liver. Overall, in brief, I could say that with the help of the bile juice produced by liver, the emulsification of fat occurred. Second gland is pancreas. It produces pancreatic juice which contains three major types of enzymes here, the trypsin, lipase and pancreatic amylase. Now I would like to mention here that pancreatic amylase is not there in the class 10 books, okay, but I have just included here so that you should be able to realize that the digestion of starch which started in the mouth obviously does not get completed there, because the food remains for a very small period of time in the mouth. So that activity will be resumed here again in the small intestine with the help of pancreatic juices and the intestinal juices that we will be discussing further. So trypsin digests proteins, lipase digests emulsified fat, and pancreatic amylase helps in the digestion of carbohydrates. We will not write starch here because it does not just act on the starch, we will write carbohydrates. Okay, now let's first discuss about the trypsin then. Trypsin is a protein digesting enzyme, and we just mentioned in the stomach that pepsin is also a protein digesting enzyme. It's a very good question that is usually asked in the papers, what is the difference between trypsin and pepsin. So you see the similarity between these two enzymes is that they both are protein digesting enzymes. But if we talk about the difference, the trypsin acts in the small intestine, the pepsin acts in the stomach. Second difference can be that the trypsin will act in basic pH ranges while the pepsin acts or digests proteins in the acidic pH ranges. So these are certain differences. There are even more, but I think two differences at least you could recall, you should remember, and you must understand about them. Okay. Next, I would also like to draw your attention towards the lipase. I have written emulsified fats here, and it's a very common mistake that usually students do, that when they are asked about the function of lipase, they simply say that the lipase helps in the digestion of fats. It is usually taken as a wrong answer because the lipase needs emulsified fat to be digested. Okay, lipase cannot act on fats straight away. Rather, it needs the help of liver, the bile salts present in them, for the fats to be emulsified first, and then it can be digested by the lipase. So please remember to write that the digestive activity of lipase is on emulsified fat, not the fats. Okay, so this was all about pancreas. Next we move to the third type of juices or glands. They are intestinal glands produce intestinal juices, and now intestinal juices will complete the digestion of food. By complete digestion, we simply mean that all the food components, carbohydrates, proteins and fats will be converted into their simplest forms, that is glucose, amino acids, and fats are converted into fatty acids and glycerol. So intestinal juice basically resumes the digestion process that was initiated in buccal cavity or in the stomach by other kind of digestive juices, but somehow these digestions were not finished. So the task of finishing up the digestion of food is on the intestinal juice. So after all the food is digested, now this digested food needs to be absorbed from the small intestine. Now let's talk about the adaptation for absorption. So we will move to the topic of absorption of digested food. So as an organ which is a prime location for the absorption of digested food, small intestines contain a special advantage or structures there. They are called as villi. They are the finger-like projections on the inner lining of intestine, and they have a significance that they increase the surface area for absorption. Now, what do we mean by this? If we look through a cross section of a small intestine, we see this infolding of the inner lining of small intestine, okay, and these inner linings are what are called as villi. So in spite of having a simple inner lining structure, this will have lesser surface area as compared to having villi here. So I would again repeat that villi help in increasing the surface area for absorption. It makes the absorption process faster and more efficient. Now, by the time the food passes through small intestine, the two major processes have already occurred. The food has been completely digested, and along with that, whatever was digested food, it has already been absorbed from the small intestine, and where this digested food goes after absorption, it enters into the bloodstream. That's a whole another topic, that what happens with this digested food once it enters into the blood. We will discuss it in the further videos. Now let's move forward to the another organ, which will be large intestine. So in the large intestine, no digestive juices are produced here since there is no digestion needed now. Absorption of water and minerals from undigested food basically is the major process that occurs here. And since absorption is involved, so villi are present for better and efficient absorption. So large intestine, as we have already discussed, that the complete digestion has already occurred by the time food passes through the small intestine. So large intestine does not need any digestive juices because digestion needs not be done. So what happens here is that since large intestine receives all the undigested and unabsorbed food inside it, so whatever is left behind, that will be absorbed in this part. So absorption of water and mineral occurs in this part. Although the textbook of class 10 does not state that large intestine has any villi inside them, but you must be clear on it that since absorption is a process occurring here, so villi are definitely present here. They may not be as numerous in number as compared to small intestine, but yes, they are definitely present here. Now, when we have discussed about the small and large intestine both, let's talk about why they have this name. Small intestine and large intestine receive their name because of their diameter. Okay, so you must be knowing that these are tubular structures, pipe-like organs, and the pipes are cylindrical in structure. So these cylindrical structures definitely have diameter as their property, and small intestine is called small because of its smaller diameter. So large intestine is called as large because of its larger diameter than small intestine. Small intestine is shorter in lumen, although length of small intestine is more than that of the large intestine. Okay, so you must be clear about why these two organs are called so. Next, we move to the next organ. Now, when the food is digested, the digested food is absorbed, and from the undigested food, the water and minerals are absorbed in the large intestine. Now, whatever remains behind, it next moves into the next organ, which is rectum. So basically, while the undigested food was passing through large intestine, the food was converted into feces. So feces enters into the rectum and is temporarily stored till the egestion time comes, and anus will be the opening through which this egestion process will occur. The feces will pass out of the body through here. So this was all about the nutrition in human beings. It followed the major 5 steps of heterotrophic nutrition. It included ingestion, that is when the food was taken inside the buccal cavity. Second, the digestion process, which occurred all throughout the buccal cavity till the small intestine. Then it followed absorption, which occurred in the small intestine itself and some part of it in the large intestine. And then comes assimilation part. This is another topic. Actually, assimilation occurs in the cells of the body or in the rest of the parts of the body where the food is utilized for growth and reparation. Then 5th process is egestion, in which the rectum and anus are involved. So thank you for watching this video. Subscribe to our channel to get useful content in future. Have a great day ahead.